In this video, I'm going to talk you through how to stitch the Echinacea design from our Botanicals range. So first up, what's in the kit? The green booklet is a stitch guide. In this, we just have instructions for loads of different stitches, those used across the entire Botanicals range. Then you've got your specific design stitch plan, and this shows you which stitches to use where. So here, for example, stem stitch, and you can then refer into this stitch booklet to go find the specific stitch we're referring to. So here I'm going to go and find the stem stitch instructions. You'll see here. So we have the specific instructions that relate to the stitch plan. And then in addition, we have numbered colours on the stitch plan. So you see here, everything highlighted in green is the number 2. So we're going to be stitching those in number 2. Then you've got your embroidery hoop, and you've got a hoop plan of how to use it. Got a little card explaining a little bit about the flower itself. And then you've got your fabric, and your fabric will have a couple of needles on it. And this is printed in a permanent ink. So this ink doesn't wash away. You've got 2 needles, and that just gives you a choice of which size you prefer working with. Now, if you've instead chosen to do the embroidery on clothing option, you'll have this wallet, which instead of the fabric has the stitch plans, and they match up in the same way to the stitch guide, the pink folded instruction booklet. There's a separate video showing how to do the embroidery on clothing specifically. So in this video, I'm just going to specifically focus on fabric option. However, the process for stitching is exactly the same. So first up, I'm just placing my hoop over one of the specific flowers here. So I'm picking this bottom left flower, but you can start anywhere on the design. You've got 2 needles, a large eye and a small eye. I prefer working with the small eye, but we've included a large eye in case you have difficulty threading a smaller needle. And throughout this entire plan, you're going to be working with 3 strands of thread. That's the same throughout the entire Botanicals range. So let's start here with the leaves, which we're doing in the stem stitch. So I'm going to cut an arm's length of thread here. And then I'm going to split the thread, and I'm splitting this down into 3 strands. So as I said, this entire Botanicals range is going to be stitched with 3 strands of thread. So I'm going to wind the remaining thread back on the bobbin, and that's just good practice because you'll come on to use that when you next need to rethread your needle. You use those 3 strands. Here we go, I'm threading up the needle with my 3 strands. And then I'm going to tie a knot in the end. So I'm placing my hoop here just in a hoop stand, and that's just for the ease of filming, but I wouldn't do this usually at home. So I'm going to stitch the leaves entirely in stem stitch, and there's a specific video on stem stitch, but I'll show you it here. What you do is you bring your needle along the outline of the shape, and you create a loose first stitch, just so you can bring your needle back up halfway along that stitch, as you can see I'm doing here. Now I always bring my needle back up on the same side. So if, say, I'm stitching along, I'll always bring my needle up on the left-hand side, as I'm doing here. It doesn't matter which side you choose, but the main thing is to be consistent. This is what enables you to create that round kind of the twisting motion that's so typical of a stem stitch. So I'm just going to keep repeating that, going the whole way up the shape. I'll get the whole way along the leaf, and then I'm going to come back down again. Now, the one thing to bear in mind when you're doing a stem stitch, as just because of the nature of the motion, as you stitch, your thread can start twisting, and so it gets increasingly hard to do. So as you can see I'm going to do here, every so often I'll just take the thread off and just straighten it all out and kind of pull it straight, just to help stop it twisting up too much and making it hard to stitch neatly. So it's worth doing that quite often when you're doing stem stitch. So that's it. That's how you're going to do the leaves and you're going to do the stems of the Echinacea. You see just layers and layers of stem stitch side by side. So next up, what we're going to go on to do is the petals of the flower. All you do is you run it under a few stitches on the back. So you can see here, I'm just passing my needle under a few of those threads on the back. I'm going to do it a couple of times, and that will just help secure the thread in place. And then once I feel like it's secure, I'll go away and I'll cut it. If I'm doing embroidery on clothing, I might just also tie a few knots in there just to make it really secure. So hoop back onto the stand, and now we're going to go on to our leaves and petals, which we're doing here in a satin stitch. So I'll show you close up. The reason we use the satin stitch is it enables us to create this blended colour so we can fade out towards the paler pink. So here I'm starting with the paler colour, but it doesn't matter whichever you choose to start with. I'm doing exactly the same process of splitting down the thread, 3 strands, and then tying and threading my needle. So bring my needle up at the end, and the key thing with a split stitch is we're going to do short stitches that we cut through halfway with our needle. So what we're trying to do is create a really blended look in the finished piece. So you see here, I'm creating a short stitch, and then I'm bringing my needle up halfway along, creating another stitch, and I'm just repeating that process. So bringing my needle up halfway along, so I keep going, just always splitting. And you see here, I'm not worrying too much about where my pink's going to join. I don't need to be too neat there with the dark pink, because I'm going to come in, I'm going to blend the 2 colours together. All I want to do is make sure I am covering over those white lines. As you know, as I said, it's not a removable ink, so you do want to cover it over. So here I'm now going in with my darker pink. You see what I'm doing is I'm bringing the stitches up so that they split into the paler colour. So I do a little short stitch again. I'm going to split that stitch, and I'm going to bring my needle up into, you see here, the paler pink. And so I keep that process going, just splitting the colour as I go, and that will help make it feel really blended. So I'll repeat that, and I'm just showing you on a couple of petals so you get the idea. Right, so next up we're going to look at the centre of the Echinacea, which we're going to do in a darning stitch. Now darning stitch is a more advanced stitch, so if you'd rather you could use something like French knots. But this is how I create this kind of woven look. So again, I'm going to be using my darker orange and my dark pink here to do this. And I'm going to again cut an arm's length of thread and thread it down into 3 strands and thread up my needle. So I'll just do this first up for both colours, just so I'm fully prepared. So I've got that threaded up onto my needle. And then I'm just going to repeat the process, just so I've got the thread ready to go. So to do my darning stitch, first I'm going to lay down my vertical lines, and I'm choosing to do my vertical lines here in the dark orange, but it really doesn't matter which one's your vertical and which is your horizontal. So all I'm doing is I'm laying down some vertical lines, and you see I'm leaving quite a big gap between them, and I need that gap because I'm going to weave in between them. I've got that all done, and then I'll secure the thread once I've got enough lines across, and then I'm going to get my dark pink as I'm doing here, and this is where I weave. I now come horizontally across and I weave between those lines. So I'm going to go under and over, and whatever I'm doing, I kind of do the opposite on the next line down. So if I went over and under before, I'll go under and over the next time. But you see, I'm just creating this weave. Now here I've taken the shape to the inner little round circle, but actually probably what I'd recommend is taking this filling to the outer circle, because it just means you're going to definitely cover over any of those white lines. So it's quite a bit of smoothing as we go when we're doing our darning. And I'll just show you to fill out the shape fully. So once that's full, then I'm going to add a line of stem stitch around it. And this is because it helps cover over the bit where the darning stitch joins the petals. So it just makes it all look a lot neater. As I said before, the ink is not removable. So you want to make sure when you do this line of stem stitch, you cover over all the white ink. And so I'd get all my petals done first before I'd add this in. So I'd have my centre done, my petals done, and then I can use my stem stitch to cover over. If you find that one loop around doesn't cover over the white lines, then go twice. So I'm using the exact same process that I used on the leaves, and I'm just working my stem stitch round in a circle now. So I'll just keep going until that's entirely done. So the final bit on the design to do is our title, our name for our flower. And this is stitched in a back stitch, again using the 3 strands of thread. So back stitch is a really lovely stitch for following lines. All I do is I bring my needle up the front, go in, and then for each stitch I bring my needle up ahead, and then I go back into the hole I last came out of. So you see, I go forward and then I come back, and that's why it's called back stitch. And this just enables you to create stitches all along a line feeding into one another. And it's as simple as that. You're going to use the back stitch to follow the lines of the text. So it is an advanced flower, this one. It does use quite a few different stitches, but you'll learn a lot along the way. And don't worry too much about how neat it all is, because you'll find the moment you step a metre away, everything comes together looking really neat. I so hope you enjoy stitching this kit, and if you do take a look at the other ones from our Botanicals range, where we also have multiple different flowers with different meanings. It's a lovely project to get stuck into. I hope you enjoy.